and arrest in spermatogenesis and seminiferous tubular degeneration, leading to infertility. So Chris Bumstead taking follistatin is literally going to castrate himself. What's up guys, Andy from HPH here, welcome back to the channel. We've got a good one for you today. So a few nights ago I was scrolling through my Instagram and I came across Chris Bumstead's story, and it was a picture of him and a Dr. Adil Khan. And basically the story was talking about how Chris Bumstead was going to be using follistatin gene therapy in order to put on some more size going into his 5th Olympia. If you don't already know, Chris Bumstead is a 4-time Olympia champion in classic physique, 4 in a row actually, and he's going for a 5P this year. So obviously, if you are at the top of your game in bodybuilding, you need to pack on as much muscle as you can, be in the best condition as you can. Obviously, there's weight classes with classic physique, but you know, the more lean tissue that you have on your body and the more you can strip off fat in that weight class, the better you'll place. And Chris Bumstead, as a top competitor, is going to do anything that he can to get ahead. And so Chris Bumstead decided to go to a doctor named Dr. Adil Khan, MD, and he is a doctor of global regenerative medicine, and he is also an entrepreneur. So it's important to note that he even has entrepreneur in his bio, because a lot of what we'll talk about and get into now is that it kind of seems like this might be more of a money grab as opposed to something that will actually enhance Chris Bumstead's physique, where it's not that it won't work, it's just that the cons and the money sort of outweigh, or at least the monetary bias sort of outweigh the actual results that Chris Bumstead is going to see. And so just looking at Dr. Khan's page here, you know, he is followed by CBUM. We scroll down a little bit and it's, you know, you get, boom, Chris Bumstead flexing, looking good at the Olympia stage, presumably last year, I believe that was. And it is his most viewed video, so, you know, it's a good marketing tool to use somebody that is at the top of his game. Chris Bumstead did end up going to him, so, you know, it's just a good coincidence, I guess, for this doctor. Here he was treating Chris of osteoarthritis. So just as a quick glance into this post,
we got Chris Bumstead, world champion Olympia.
Classic physique.
Sorry, classic physique.
Classic physique. But I'm more so interested in this portion right here. So 3D bioprinted gene-edited stem cells intricately woven into a scaffold rejuvenating entire joints. So specifically, this doctor is a doctor that focuses on gene editing or gene therapy. And so that's what we're going to talk about now with follistatin. So this here was specifically of stem cells, but it's not pictured anywhere here on this page, and the story's obviously gone away after the 24 hours now. But Chris Bumstead was going under for follistatin gene therapy. And so you're asking yourself now, what is follistatin? It's a great question. So as quoted by the NIH, follistatin is a single-chain gonadal protein that is specifically inhibits follicle-stimulating hormone release. And so you're thinking to yourself now, how the hell does inhibiting follicle-stimulating hormone release, inhibiting hormones, going to impact your muscle growth in a positive way? So typically when we think of hormones, we're like, okay, if we decrease our testosterone, things like that, we're going to decrease our muscle mass. This pathway of follistatin actually works to increase muscle through a different pathway, which is in relation to myostatin. And so follistatin inhibits myostatin, and myostatin is an inhibitor of muscle size and muscle gain. So you're inhibiting an inhibitor, so it's a double negative equaling a positive. So in this case, 2 negatives do make a positive. So there is large amounts of evidence that go into talking about how follistatin is great at inhibiting myostatin. And then we even know from guys like Phil Heath, I think, even had a myostatin mutation of his like actual genetics, not the therapy itself, but the actual genetics, which is called the Hercules gene. It basically enables you to just blow up with muscle size because there's nothing actually stopping that muscle from growing. And so this therapy using exogenous follistatin as your gene therapy is going to sort of block that myostatin from a baseline level so that your body doesn't have as much inhibition of that muscle size itself. So it's not going to be the thing that's actually building the muscle, right? That still comes from like your testosterone, your protein, and all that, and actually creating a stimuli to work out and build that muscle. But it's going to inhibit the inhibitor of that muscle growth, okay? Now, that's all nice and dandy, but there's plenty of side effects and plenty of cons into using this therapy, which I'm going to get into specifically from the mouth of Dr. Khan here. So we're just going to look at a quick overview of what Dr. Khan goes into about the follistatin gene therapy, and specifically with his research in the Allen Oregon Research Review, which is very important to note because there is a potential bias, which we'll get into in a second. But
I've always wondered, how can I increase my genetic ceiling? I never wanted to take anabolic steroids.
Okay, so I went into first that he is a natural bodybuilder of 10 years. So presumably he stayed natural that entire time. He says he doesn't want to take anabolic steroids, therefore he's looking for an alternative or safer option, something that wouldn't have the side effects of steroids. And so presumably he thinks that, or he has evidence that follistatin would be the way to go. We're going to see quickly that that is certainly not the case, and in fact it's quite the same side effects as steroids, but we'll let him get into it.
So finally, I was very, very excited when I heard about follistatin gene therapy. This has a potential, and I will tell you that it has, in fact, increased my genetic ceiling already. I only did it 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so in 2 weeks, he has used follistatin gene therapy, and he's already started to see results. So presumably it does work quite fast, something that you would see in things such as steroids or SARMs or other PEDs. So there's, good amount of positives that he's starting to see already from using follistatin. It works in a very quick amount. He doesn't have to wait a year for it to actually sort of like slowly kind of grow. Things like, creatine or some sort of other natural things. This is like his version, or what he's marketing it to be, is that it is a natural therapy that would be able to produce the same results as steroids would without the side effects.
And I already feel stronger, have better recovery. I've already set some personal bests, and this is me in a calorie deficit.
And so he says he does this in a calorie deficit, so this is something where muscle growth is not optimal, and so he's really exaggerating the effects, or really exacerbating the effects of this follistatin gene therapy to work well even as you're cutting. So even for someone like Chris Bumstead going into the Olympia, he's probably going to have to start dieting very hard to get to extreme low levels of body fat, and follistatin is something that can help put on the muscle as he's doing that cut.
I can only imagine what I can do when I'm in a calorie surplus. So how does the follistatin gene therapy actually work? So it's actually designed by a company called MiniCircle. It's backed by Peter Thiel, who's one of the best investors of all time.
And this is where we start getting into a bit of the shady aspects. So he's outsourcing a company called MiniCircle, I guess he said, and they're the company that provides that follistatin gene therapy. And it's backed by Peter Thiel, which I actually do know of Peter Thiel. He is a great investor. He's even wrote a book with some Peter Masterson, something Masterson or whatever, that they've been in the investing game for a while. And the most important thing for an investor to do, right, is to get a great return on their investment. Now, it could be that Peter Thiel's philosophy about the world is that we're going to stem more to genetic therapies in the future as opposed to just drug targets or steroids or whatever that may be. But regardless, he's expecting this company to grow, and he's expecting this company, specifically MiniCircle, to be a good company. And so, as an investor, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, as a scientist who's looking to make money as well, backing research with a company that is going to be promoting a certain substance or a certain product, right? That is where the lines become blurred. That is where bias comes into play, and that's where, as a part of publishing a paper, you have to disclose these sort of biases, right? These monetary funding or biases that you may have in this paper that, you don't necessarily need to do as, shorts or reels or promoting on Instagram, but it's something where you kind of start to see the marketing aspects of this and you start to question its legitimacy.
So I'm pretty sure it's going to be a very, very large company in a few years. Importantly, what they did, instead of using a viral vector, they decided to use a bacterial vector to administer different proteins. When we're talking about...
Okay, so typically there's two ways to administer gene therapy to make sure of its slow, sustained release, and that's using bacteria or viral administration. So basically something that's going to live inside of your body that's able to stay in there for a long period of time. It reduces the half-life that's needed of the certain therapy or drug, and that's typical for these gene therapies. It's nothing that's usually something to worry about. It's usually safe bacterias or whatever sort of administration that they use, they're generally much safer than you would think just from hearing, like, I'm putting bacteria into my body. Probiotics are bacteria, you're putting that into your body, right? These are things that can be healthy. But let's see which bacteria he decides to use.
The gene therapy, it just means there's a foreign organism going into your body, either a virus or a bacteria, and it's going to be modifying your genes or increasing certain pathways or decreasing other pathways. What Minicircle did, they found the perfect bacterial vector, E. coli, and figured out how to use it.
E. coli. They decided to use E. coli, which, I mean, if you haven't heard now of E. coli, it's something that where if you eat large amounts of like uncooked meat and things like that, that's where you get E. coli, and it can cause serious infections, food poisoning, terrible digestion, things like that. So using E. coli as the perfect vector, or the perfect medium in order to administer this gene therapy is kind of suspicious already. It's kind of wild. Like, it might work from a chemical or genetic standpoint of like, okay, this is a good vector, like it holds the slow sustained release quite well, but from like a physiological perspective of what am I putting inside my body, E. coli does not seem to be the best option, the perfect option, as this doctor is explaining. And so are we just supposed to trust him that like, okay, they found the perfect one, it's E. coli, don't worry about it at all, even though we've already known that, I mean, we're told all the time, just don't eat undercooked meats, right? You're gonna get sick. It's because of E. coli. So kind of doesn't make sense there. Still not really shady, it's just kind of like questionable, like why, okay, now I gotta do the drawbacks of like, do I want E. coli and food poisoning and 5 pounds of muscle or not? Like, now you're just starting to like weigh out the benefits and cons. But we're gonna get into the hormonal effects in a second, and that should probably sway your mindset into thinking there's probably better ways to put on 5 pounds of muscle.
When it's released, what follistatin does is sends a signal to your body saying, hey, you don't need as much myostatin. So the as a natural bodybuilder for...
So that's basically the end of that short, but it's important to note that we said earlier, right, follistatin is, the specific function of follistatin is to inhibit follicle-stimulating hormone release. And so when we're talking about hormones in our endocrine system, it works in like a seesaw fashion. So you have something that typically, first of all, it's a cascade. So one hormone is going to stimulate another hormone in a different gland and stimulate another hormone that has an output effect, right? And then those hormones, whenever there's a bunch of them, they feed back as a part of what's called a negative feedback loop, and that's going to stop it. So think about, we're sending our signal from our hypothalamus and our brain from, let's say it's like gonadotropin releasing hormone, right? And so that's going to ultimately go down to your testes to produce testosterone, right? And so once you have that signal to produce testosterone, there's a lot of it, that testosterone will go back up to the brain, up to the hypothalamus, and say, okay, we have testosterone now. It's the actual molecule itself. It'll bind to that and say, we're good, there's enough of us, we have so much that we even were able to travel all the way up here and tell you to stop signaling us to make some more. And then throughout the day, you just have those pulsatile, seesawing, okay, we have enough, it's going down, we need some more. Okay, we have enough, okay, now we need some more. And so that's how it happens. So in terms of follistatin, you have follicle-stimulating hormone release, and follistatin's kind of there just to sort of like mediate it. It's not really doing the negative feedback loop up to the top, but what it's doing is that it's released in conjunction with this follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH for short, and it kind of binds to it, right? And it says, there's a lot of you around, we're just going to snatch you up and kind of like see what's good. We're just going to like hold you back. We're not going to let you bind to stuff and actually exert your actions, right? And so follicle-stimulating hormone is the thing that actually goes down to create sperm. So think about it this way. The main function of follistatin is to make sure you don't produce enough sperm as a male. And so in females, it's to make sure your ovaries aren't overstimulated, okay? So that's its main function. The main function is not to tell myostatin we're good, right? It's the main function of follistatin is not to go to myostatin. It's to go to follicle stimulating hormone, follistatin, stopping follicle stimulating hormone, okay? It's just a side pathway that happened to be found, researched, and it says, okay, well, there is some interplay with myostatin that tells it to stop, and therefore you can build more muscle. But that's not its main function, as this doctor prescribes. So, or describes, not prescribes. It does certainly work, right? So there's plenty of studies around that does show that there is a significant amount of muscle stimulation and muscle growth because of that interplay between follistatin inhibiting myostatin. However, again, that's not even its main function. The main function of this is going to be inhibiting follicle stimulating hormone, which in this study here says, okay, in addition, there's no deleterious effects of taking the follistatin that were seen on any other organ system, cool, other than gonadal tissue, okay? And so that's your gonads, that's like your testes, right? So as a male, yeah, it's all good, except you lost function in your testicles. It's a pretty big deal, right? In males, testes size was decreased with variable Leydig cell hyperplasia and arrest in spermatogenesis and seminiferous tubular degeneration leading to infertility. So Chris Bumstead, taking follistatin, is literally going to castrate himself. He's going to castrate. Not only is he seeing some effects because he's probably taken some sort of testosterone or testosterone derivative as a part of his cycle, which is going to negative feedback, right, up to the hypothalamus to stop producing testosterone ultimately, because he's already getting enough exogenously pinning himself, right, with steroids. Now, as a side pathway, he's also not getting the sperm that's needed from that. So he's already kind of lowering his sexual drive, right, with taking exogenous steroids. But on top of that, now he's killing the actual thing that is supposed to function if he even does have the sexual drive. So when you negative feedback to yourself that says, okay, we don't need any more testosterone because we're already taking some, right, as like a steroid, we're pinning ourselves with exogenous steroids. That's one thing, because typically they go on cycles, meaning bodybuilders would take it for a certain amount of weeks, they come off, right, and then so it allows the body to sort of build that up again, because once you stop pinning yourself with that testosterone, your body's like, okay, now we need to start producing some again. But this is sort of kind of different, and this is, we talked earlier about how follistatin and follicle stimulating hormone signals to the Leydig cells to produce sperm. And so when you start messing with the cells themselves and their function as a gene therapy, which all of our cells contain all of our genes, when you start messing with those cells, it's very hard to get those cells back. And in fact, even in certain conditions like cancer even, that is a description of hyperplasia, which we saw in Leydig cells, hyperplasia, so overproducing too many of those cells, and the change of that cell type and function. It's all discombobulated, it's distorted. The cell's not doing its normal function. It looks different, it acts different. And so that's kind of what follistatin is doing in too high of amounts. Alright, so let's bring this back to testosterone. So when we're thinking about under normal physiological conditions, normal circumstances, right? So not including hypogonadism, or if you have some sort of disorder or disease, right? Under normal circumstances, testosterone is very regulated. There's only a certain amount. And so you might be swinging on the lower end or the upper end. People talk, I want to raise my testosterone. That's really talking about on what level of normal do you want to be on, right? The lower, the higher normal, whatever. Most people want to be on the higher level of normal, okay? But once we start pinning ourselves with exogenous testosterone, or taking steroids, testosterone derivatives, things like that, what happens is there's too much testosterone in the body. And the body's very smart. It wants to bring it back down to normal. It's like, whoa, this is way too much. We cannot handle this. We're going to stop producing our own because this is way too much. So it stops producing its own, right, to a certain level to where it'll match what the normal testosterone levels are. And so if you're taking too much, you're going to shut down your entire body's production of testosterone. And so now we're thinking about follistatin and follicle stimulating hormones. It's impacting your endocrine system just as much as it's impacting your genetics, okay? So even though follistatin is a genetic therapy, it's being derived to change your genes, to change myostatin, right? It's also going to have some effects on your hormones. And when you bring up hormones too much, it's going to shut down your own body's production. And so that's why we start to see things like decrease in testes size, right? Variable Leydig cell hyperplasia, and arrest in spermatogenesis. And then this is very important, even though it's kind of at the end here, seminiferous tubular degeneration leading to infertility. And so when we're talking about too much testosterone, that's one thing, because it is too much of a hormone, okay? And so the only thing that's really changing now is that your hormones are out of whack. The levels are out of whack. And so once you hop off that testosterone, and most bodybuilders go into cycles where they take it for a certain amount of weeks, and they hop off to re-bring up your body's natural production to match the normal levels. What happens when you start changing the seminiferous tubes, right, so it's degeneration, you're actually killing off the cells or changing the cells. Okay? And so that's different. You can't hop on a PCT or post-cycle therapy to rechange your cells back to what they were before. Okay? This is not hormone therapy. This is like cellular genetic therapies. And once you change that, it is very, very difficult to go back. So this is likely something that you're going to need to be on for life. Okay? This is not just, I'm going to hop on a follistatin cycle or a peptide cycle. This is, I'm changing my genetics from a baseline level of how my body wants to function. And even though it might be changing myostatin for what you think would be the better, it's going to also change your hormone function from baseline for the worse, and probably for a lot worse if now we're talking about prolonged arrest in spermatogenesis. And so you're not going to be able to produce sperm even if you decide, oh, I messed up, I don't want to do this anymore, I just wanted the 5 pounds of muscle for a short period of time. Now I can just go back and take a PCT, I'm going to go get it back. No, you can't. You changed your genes. You changed how your cells are functioning. And once that happens, it's very hard to go back. And just as an example, cancer is an example of when your cells in your bodies change from a genetic standpoint, and then it distorts the cell, its look, its function, because as a principal rule of biology, structure equals function. So once you change the structure of a cell, you change its function. And then so you start to have these masses that shouldn't be where they are, and then it confuses the body and essentially just starts taking up all nutrients and things go out of whack and then you just die. So I'm not saying if you take follistatin therapy you're going to die, yada, yada, yada. But I am saying there are some serious side effects that aren't really marketed by this doctor. And as an MD, somebody that we all will kind of, blindly trust, this is something that should be explained, at least in his videos, if he's supposed to be putting out good quality content. Not just to get people hyped up as a marketing ruse, as some sort of miracle drug that everybody's looking for, which we'll go back to his page. And so up over here, he's got this follistatin little highlight on top. And so this whole little follistatin highlight goes through and he's talking about the wonders of it. But look at this, right? It's the magic injection we've all been waiting for, right? Something that's gonna absolutely work, it's magic, okay? It's not gonna have any side effects whatsoever. So as a doctor, this seems more like a marketing ruse as opposed to good quality information that we should be expecting from an MD on these platforms, right? And it's just a little bit disappointing that it just seems as if the marketing and the money is getting in the way of something that can actually potentially be beneficial. And for some sort of patients, it is. If you have muscular degeneration symptoms, this is something that would clearly help. It's clearly helped in literature, in publications, right? For someone that is not in that disease category, there are some serious cons that he is just blindly neglecting, it seems like, which is unfortunate. Okay, so going back to the video, some of these comments are funny. So we're using science to enhance our genetics and feeling good about the fact that we're not cheating with steroids, right? At this point, it kind of seems like, if you're going to try to stay the natural way, this certainly isn't the natural way. You're literally changing your genetics. There's nothing natural about it, right? You're putting E. coli into your system to change something. And just sort of wrap this all up together. So now, if you're still wondering about like the pros and cons, weighing it out, you're thinking, will an extra 5 pounds of muscle really be worth not, having sperm or having kids, castrating myself, those sort of things. You're thinking to yourself, what else is there out there? Should I just be taking steroids or SARMs at that point? And I think it is very comparable to compare follistatin gene therapy, the results that you should expect muscular-wise and even hormonally-wise, side effects-wise, to YK11. And so YK11 is a SARM that also raises the body's follistatin levels, which inhibits myostatin. So this SARM specifically acts as the same function as this follistatin gene therapy would do. Now, I would assume that follistatin gene therapy would be just a different delivery mechanism, right? You're using E. coli, which you can argue if that's safer or not than taking a SARM by pill form. But at the very least, the gene therapy is going to have that slow sustained release, whereas YK11, taking a SARM as like a pill form or a shot, whatever the mechanism might be, it's going to have your ups and down spikes. But in general, right, these are very comparable mechanisms, very comparable substances. And so if you're thinking to yourself, now, should I just, take SARMs or take follistatin gene therapy? even if you're still wondering at this point, which again, I'm not telling you to take or not to take something. It's your life. Do what you want. I'm not a doctor. I'm not supposed to prescribe anything or diagnose or treat or whatever. I'm just clearly explaining whatever is out there on the internet and illuminating certain things. But if you're really considering those two things, which one will be best for you, this comment will wrap it up. What is the cost? It'll be released to the public in about 6 months or so. That was about 17 weeks ago. The price is $25K. So $25,000 to take something that will potentially castrate yourself and change your cells in a way that you would likely not be able to have kids. You know, it's up to you if you think that's worth it. Some people, you know, that's just what they want. They want the extra 5 pounds of muscle at any cost. And that's your prerogative. But at least people should have all the information. And I made this video, not that Chris Bumstead's probably going to see this or anything, but I hope he was aware of the literature and the evidence that's out there that could potentially be as cons, and not sort of just see this, reach out to a doctor that is going to be selling this sort of therapy at a very high price point that is backed by research that he did, so there's monetary bias to his research that would probably biasly hold some negative claims, possibly. Not saying he did or didn't. I'm not calling him out. It's just highly speculative. And again, you know, I'm not here to say that he shouldn't have taken it, should take it. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't. It's just that if anybody is going to do anything, they should be adequately informed about all of the possible things that they're doing to themselves. And so it is just, it's kind of unfortunate that, you know, this isn't some guy that you just met in the gym locker room that's like, hey, I got Folostat and want to hit some up, and then he's like, sure, whatever. You know, this is an MD, this is a doctor, this is somebody that should be, you know, explaining all the benefits and the risks of everything. This is someone that is supposed to be looking after your health. And so, you know, I hope Chris was aware of this potential side effect, even if it's not definitive. But it is in the literature, and there is a, you know, possible association to it. So Chris should be aware of that. Hopefully he was informed before he did this. He is someone that is competing at the highest of levels, so even if he was informed, possibly, you know, this might be a good choice for him or not, depending on whatever his goals are. That's Chris's prerogative, but again, just want everybody to be informed about the possible side effects of anything that you're taking, right? So don't just kind of see a gene therapy and just sort of assume that, you know, just because it's coming from a certain source, that this is the end-all be-all miracle magic outcome that he described. So, you know, that's it for this video. If you guys do want to know more about genetics or anything that I'm associated with, we focus on more natural alternatives to certain genetics, no gene therapies that introduce E. coli into your system. Not that that apparently is a bad thing. I thought it was. Who knows? But, you know, we work with your genetics, not against it. And so that'll all be linked in the description below. But, you know, if not, totally cool. Hope you guys learned something. And click the subscribe if you want to, the like, you know, do all that stuff, because I do want to make more of these videos and spend a lot of my time, you know, editing and filming and all that stuff. So I do find this really interesting. And hopefully I'll keep informing you guys. So I'll catch you guys in the next one.